Whenever you're ready.
So a man that is 29 years old recently graduated from the University of Sydney in the history department, and he had loving parents. He had a girlfriend for I think maybe like 10 years, and he got along with everybody. He had brothers and sisters, and so since he recently graduated, one night he was looking outside of his window, and he thought to himself, it would be great if I could just fall out of this window and just die, or if I just slit my wrists and I would just be nothing. And you guys are probably thinking, like, what the heck? This guy has it all, you know? He has a life that most of us aren't planning on having, you know, furthering our education and being somebody. But that story came from mentalhealth.gov, and he wasn't just thinking these things just because. He suffered from mental illness, and it's called depression. And so, sorry, he was thinking all of these things not just because. Depression is something that is so serious, and it makes you think random thoughts. And the fact that I even questioned him, you know, thinking like he has it all, like why is he thinking this way? I immediately put a stigma on him, and I immediately questioned him. And today I'm going to talk to you guys about how mental illness occurs, how society has a stigma on mental illness, and how we can change our view on mental illness. So when we hear stories like that, we automatically think, like, why does that happen? You know, why do people automatically assume these feelings and the way of thinking of wanting to commit suicide, or feeling depressed and not sure of themselves? And I don't know if you guys have I don't know if you guys have suffered from depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or anything like that, but those are mental illnesses. And we should not question those illnesses. We should be able to see why these happen and understand these people, because it's not easy. And so from medicine.net, most illnesses are not known, but it's a combination of genetic, biological, and psychological and environmental factors. And because of that, because we don't know where it comes from, it literally just is something in their brain telling them things. It's hard for us to relate and to understand and be aware of these factors. And so when someone is saying all these things of, you know, I feel useless, I am sad, constantly sad all the time, you know, I have no urge to want to do anything the next morning, or, you know, just totally not motivated to do anything. People believe that it won't happen to them. It won't happen to them. You know, depression is rare, and it's a sign of weakness. You feel like you are just constantly, something is always being thrown at you. But that was cited by hpb.org, and people need to understand that things can change. You know, it is not only this isn't your last resort to be depressed and to have this illness. In fact, 1 in 5 adults in America suffer one of these mental illnesses, and it is something that, it is something that should be solved, and you guys, no one should be ashamed of it. So when people are ashamed and when people are constantly at odds of not knowing what to do with their illness, they suddenly their last resort is suicide. And suicide, one of my teachers in high school, I know of people that have had suicidal thoughts, and my teacher once told me, suicide is a permanent solution for a temporary problem. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I first heard that, I was like, oh my God, that is deep. Because the thing is that these people with mental illnesses, that is their solution. You know, this feeling isn't just temporary, it happens all the time. And so when these things happen, they ultimately have to resort to suicide. And 90% of people that die by suicide have mental illness. And that was, that's by NAMI.org. And so when things like this happen, we need to try to prevent suicide. We need to prevent suicide from happening with the people that do have mental illnesses. And a story of mine that I have is my dad. My dad suffers, from severe depression and anxiety, and he has been dealing with it since he was 15. He's now 49, and I didn't know of it until I was probably maybe my junior year of high school, and so I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to handle it because I personally don't suffer from it, and so it was hard for me to even know that my dad has depression. Since I don't know, I can't relate. Like I said, we usually don't understand where it comes from. So my dad, a few examples is he'll come home from work and he'll be really tired, and so I don't bother him, and he'll just go into his room and he won't come out till the next morning, And it's random because it's like, I want to talk, I want to hang out, I want to be able to do these things, but me, I have to understand that, his mind's just not there. He's not there, and I have to be okay with that. I need to understand that he needs a space, and he knows that my sisters, my mom, and I are there for him, and if he wants to talk, he can talk about it, but you can't push people and be like, hey, what's wrong with you? You can't do that. You have to be understanding about things like that. My dad also, he, in the middle of the night, he'll get his anxiety attacks, and you'll hear him in the middle of the night, like at midnight or 1 in the morning, waking up, and he's breathing super loud, and he's pacing back and forth in the living room, and we can't do anything about it. We just wake up in the middle of the night, half asleep, we're sometimes over it, because sometimes it gets so hard. We're like, Dad, it's okay, you're fine, and he'll just be freaking out. And you just need to be there for that person. And another example is we'll be in the car and we're driving, and he'll just hold onto the steering wheel really tight, and he starts coughing, and that's when he's having a panic attack. And my sisters, my mom, and I, we cannot react nervous. Obviously, we're in the freaking car. It's scary. And we're like, hey, you're okay. It's not that big of a deal. And he needs to distract himself, so he puts the AC on super high, super cold, or he'll put the windows down. And we need to react in a calm manner. We can't be freaking out, and we just need to be calm for him. And so I actually interviewed my dad for this speech, and I told him, I was like, so how do you, how do you get better? Does it get better? And he said, when I married your mom and I had kids, I noticed that, I'm trying really hard not to cry, but I noticed that when I got my depression and anxiety, that my family was the only thing that kept me going. And he said that we were his engine and that we were his motivation to keep on going. And I am so happy that my dad chose to do that. Sorry. And so it's hard. It's hard, and people don't understand that. So when people have that stigma and don't understand what mental illness does to you, it is something that is it's hard to go through. So, sorry guys. So advice that I have for you guys is that if you guys ever know anyone that has a mental illness, or if you guys are suffering through something, I have 3 things that hopefully help, and you guys could take my advice is, don't be ashamed if you have a mental illness or if someone has a mental illness, okay? Talk about it. Don't see a therapist, see a psychiatrist, get help, seek treatment. It's not that big, it's a big deal, but it's something that is worth talking about. Number 2 is do something new. Get out of a routine. And set realistic goals for yourself. So if you want to, I'm not saying set goals like go to Paris by the end of the semester. That's not realistic. If you guys take naps and it's in your schedule, don't take a nap. Go to the park. Go walk. Do the dishes. I know it's boring, but do something new. Do something that's going to be different. And number 3 is exercise. because exercise works. It helps you take your mind off of things, and it helps you guys. It keeps your body and your brain going, and it motivates you to want to become a better person. And so, in conclusion, I talked to you guys about how mental illness occurs, how we could change the stigma of it, and how we could be able to. I'm sorry, I totally forgot how we could be able to understand it. And so, since I talked to you guys about that, I just urge you guys to, hopefully I changed your mind on how to view mental illness and to be an advocate about it, because some people can't do it, and so I just wanted to let you guys know that be a voice for people that can. So, yeah.
All right, Diego, what did you think?
Overall, I thought it was a pretty good speech. A couple criticisms, I guess. The summary and the preview seemed a little different, so the structure kind of threw me off. I guess personally, I would have liked to know more about how depression works in the brain, like what's exactly going on physically. But you know, I was pretty impressed that you were able to come up here and talk without using much notes, and you spoke well, and you looked at everybody, and you filled out the time, and you gave sources to everything you talked about. So I thought it was a pretty good speech. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Well, I like the story that you had at the beginning to kind of get our attention with a little bit of suspense in it, and then you identify what the subject was. I thought that was effective, a good transition there. You know, there's a good layout of the structure at the beginning of the speech. I think maybe I understand a little bit what Diego's talking about at the end of the speech. It's not quite as well organized. Part of that is probably the delivery issues that you go through at the end when you have your emotional involvement in it, and so you kind of lose your focus, and your plan isn't quite as well executed as it might have been at the beginning. But like I said, I thought you laid it out pretty well at the beginning, and I could see where you were headed there. I thought you used pretty solid data in most of the presentation and did a good job citing it. At one point I said we ought to get some material about how frequently this occurs, and then finally you got to a number. You had that 1 in 5 number that you presented. I thought, okay, good. That was something that was needed, maybe a little bit earlier in the speech, but I thought it was fine. I thought that the issue of stigmatization and shame needed to be developed a little bit more, because that might be the thing that discourages people from seeking assistance, whether it is for themselves or for their family members, for instance. So, you know, if you think there's something wrong with your mother or your brother or your sister or something like that, but you don't want to bring it to the surface, you might not talk about those kinds of things because you are shamed into that, because we have this stigmatization and that as a consequence, that's the kind of thing that prevents people from getting the help that they need, from learning to cope with whatever it is, from getting maybe potentially effective treatment. I'm sure that there are all kinds of treatments that get suggested. Some work, some don't. Some people have to try different things repeatedly. You know, in your father's situation, I don't know what kinds of treatments have been tried. There's lots of medications that people use, lots of psychotherapy stuff that people go through, counseling issues. And at the end, I thought you had some nice personal suggestions, you know, for how people might address those issues for themselves. It's hard to get people, for instance, who have some kind of mental illness, psychological problem like that, to always see those sorts of things, and to get them to say, okay, well, instead of going in and doing your routine, let's do something else. it's tough to get people to break out of that. Getting people to do it for themselves, maybe that's a little bit better. I thought that the presentation stuff was very good. Diego said it, you're looking at everybody for the most part. You're not overly dependent on notes. Sometimes your gestures are a little, like this. But I wrote down, I thought it was kind of funny because you have, I don't know what kind of car you guys have, but when you talked about your dad putting down the windows, you did the gesture that somebody from my generation would do. I don't imagine that there are a lot of people from your generation who roll down the windows, and people go, what is she doing? That kind of thing. Yeah, okay, so you might have those kinds of windows. Well, like I said, it was one of those things, and it made it feel a little bit more personal. And I don't think you need to apologize about having a personal moment. I know, you maybe have to explain. Let me catch up here for a second, folks, because this is tough. But I think that that's the kind of thing that gives you ethos. You know what you're talking about. You have a motivation for talking about this. You're going to get a stronger connection with the audience when you have the kind of reaction. You didn't lose control. You just had a momentary, you have to kind of catch your breath and move forward again, because you're talking about something that's personal. And we talked about that when we were talking about anxiety issues. This is an illustration of one of those things that kind of creates anxiety. You're motivated to talk about the subject, you're giving a speech, and then you have an emotional reaction to something you're talking about, and that kind of increases your anxiety a little bit, which I think is why you're a little bit flustered at the end of the presentation, and it doesn't come out as smoothly as it might. So I wouldn't panic too much about that. I wouldn't worry too much about it, because I think the other compensates a little bit. I think that people get a chance to connect a little bit more as a result of your delivery. All right, thank you.